Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mark, for that nice introduction. Can I also begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people as the traditional owners and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And in case you think this is mere ritual, it started me thinking, not just about the evils of dispossession, which is a serious subject indeed, but also in the context of this evening's event, about the universality of humour, especially as it might manifest itself in languages other than English, such as in the multitude of Aboriginal languages across Australia. I got a taste of this potential universality recently when, in preparation for a talk I gave at the National Museum of Australia about connections between the Rome exhibition and lawyers and things of legal interest, I read Mary Beard's book on laughter in ancient Rome, and I got some sense of puns and word plays in Latin. Troy, I don't know if you're a linguist, but if so, humour in languages other than English could be your next project. Just a suggestion. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate everyone on the production of this little book. I say little book, small in size but big in impact. Troy, of course, as author, deserves our greatest congratulations, but I want to also acknowledge the role of the National Library as publisher. And Candace, I suspect it's not widely known that the NLA has a vibrant publishing arm, and one that goes beyond the publications of your many exhibitions. You've published some outstanding books over the years, and Troy must be very happy that you've published his second venture into humour, compiled, of course, with significant reliance on the resources of the National Library, both as to text and to pictures. It was actually the pictorial collection that first introduced me 30 years ago to the magic of the National Library when I published my illustrated book, Encounters with the Australian Constitution, and sourced some amazing historical photos, such as the reading of the Proclamation of Federation to a large crowd in Centennial Park, Sydney on the 1st of January 1901. More recently, as Mark mentioned, I've worked closely with the library's oral history unit, both as interviewer and interviewee. And through these experiences, I've come to love the library. So it's an honour to have been asked to launch Troy's book, both in this iconic location and as an LLA publication. I should first say a word about Troy. I'm immensely proud of Troy, not only as a first-class honours law graduate from the ANU, but also, as we heard, going back 20 years, as our Chief Research Associate, full-time for 3 years, on the Oxford Companion to the High Court of Australia, which was a massive project involving the writing of 435 A to Z entries and the management of 225 authors. Each one as touchy and protective as the other of their own styles and idiosyncrasies. And I won't single anyone out, but the judges were the worst. Troy not only handled this challenging situation with aplomb, but also wrote a number of the entries himself, including the entry on humour in the High Court, an entry that you might expect to be relatively barren, but in fact is brought out in its full richness under Troy's hand. So the seeds were sown, and now we have this marvellous funny dictionary. Generally speaking, it's not easy to write about humour. The written word can so easily kill the spontaneity of the moment, or the ambience, if not the transience of the context. But fortunately for Troy, this is less true of the student howler, the subject of his funny dictionary, than it is for deliberate jokes. The howler, based on accidental mistake, generally originates in writing, and therefore assumes a life and permanence of its own. Indeed, the humour leaps off the page at you, sometimes cerebrally, sometimes viscerally, but always to great effect. And this leads me to say that there are two really outstanding aspects of Troy's book. The first is the compilation of the howlers themselves, and I come to that in a moment. Mark has already given you a little taste. But the second is Troy's meticulously scholarly, though engagingly light-handed introduction to the book, his preface, in which he explains what makes a howler funny and takes us through the history of previous publications and our fascination with the book. I really commend Troy's preface to you. It will be a point of reference, I think, on this subject for years to come. One of the great classic books on humour to which Troy refers in his preface is Seller and Yateman's 1066 and All That, published in 1930 and replete with both historical parodies and student howlers. Actually, Troy, you didn't give it its full title. The full title of the book is 1066 and All That, a memorable history of England comprising all the parts you can remember, including 103 good things, 5 bad kings and 2 genuine days. And it's been republished many, many times, most recently as 2009. Anyway, I was sure that I had a copy of this book, so I rushed excitedly to my bookshelf to see if I could find it. But the memory plays funny tricks. What I had on my bookshelf was a copy of the 1958 autobiography of the famous Australian cricketer Arthur Maley, entitled 10466, which, as you might guess, is a reference to Maley's best bowling figures in a match against Gloucestershire in 1921. Two things really struck me about Arthur Maley's book. First, there's a very playful foreword by the then Prime Minister, Sir Robert Menzies, in which, because of Maley's reputation not only as a cricketer but also as a humorist, Menzies engages in his own analysis of the nature of humour. You know, you can do all the intensive research imaginable on a subject like humour and still stumble upon a gem like this through pure serendipity. Secondly, although Maley's title was a clear nod to Seller and Yeoman's classic, there's no reference to or explanation of this choice of title. Clearly, even more than a quarter of a century after its first publication, 1066 and All That was such a familiar work that any reference to it needed no explanation. Troy, we can only hold out hope that one day the funny dictionary will be similarly regarded, and I think we have every reason to be optimistic about that. Now, what about the funny dictionary itself? I really should give you some of my own favourite examples of the howlers, shouldn't I? I don't want to tread on Troy's toes. I'm sure he'll mention some of his favourites in a moment. But just to give you some of the flavour of the book, a couple of examples will suffice. Both taken from the field of marriage, an evidently rich source of misunderstanding and mishearing. Acrimony. This is defined as what a man must give his divorced wife. And perhaps this is the consequence of the word for having only one wife or husband, namely monotony. I could go on with a rich selection from Troy's 522 definitions. You know that? But you can read them for yourselves, and I strongly encourage you to do so. Instead, I'm going to take my cue from Troy's insistence on perhaps the most important point of all about student howlers, that they must be genuine mistakes and not contrived humour or deliberate jokes, and share with you a few from my own experience. Everyone, especially teachers, will have their own unique examples, which just underlines the ubiquity of these hilarious mistakes and their unfailing ability to generate mirth. I note a number of student howlers in my book, Encounters with the Australian Constitution. For some reason, many of my students have difficulty with the notion of the founding fathers of the Constitution. I received essays over the years with variations ranging from the foundering fathers to the floundering fathers to even the foundling fathers. But I was so taken by an evidently uncorrected typographical error in one essay, which purported to discuss the original intention, wait for it, the original intention of the Pounding Panthers, that I used that description as the title of an article I later wrote on the topic. One student tried to avoid this difficulty by referring in an admirably non-sexist way to the framers of the Constitution, but only managed to come up with a transposition of letters that rendered it as the farmers of the Constitution. And another explained in a footnote that he'd found his information about the Constitution in Professor Peter Hanks's tomb. Clearly he meant tone, and no doubt he took his cue from the spelling of cone. The traps of inconsistency in the English language. Another student declared that in one of the leading constitutional cases he was very much attracted to the view of Justice Dawson, but noted that Justice Dawson was in dissent, spelt D-E-S-C-E-N-T. And I don't recall whether it was this or some other criticism in my book that distracted him, but Justice Dawson later told the story of how my book had cost him $800. He explained he was so bemused about what I'd related in the book that when backing his car out of his garage, he unfortunately forgot to open the garage door. My own children, and this is perhaps why they haven't come tonight, have given me a rich supply of howlers in the course of their language acquisition. Words with more than one meaning were deciduous. Or was it trees that lost their leaves being ambiguous? I don't exactly recall. But I do recall that coffee without caffeine had been decapitated, and that a person who said one thing and did another was a hypnotist. These are all classic howlers, but as Troy points out, the humour can sometimes come from unfortunate juxtaposition and sometimes from mishearing. My favourite example of unfortunate juxtaposition is an advertisement placed by the Law Society of New South Wales some years ago in the Sydney Morning Herald as part of Law Week. It read, "Mutual wills are a good idea when both partners die together. A solicitor can advise on how this might be arranged." And my favourite example of mishearing, and I say this now in deference to my good friend Tony Blacksfield, who's here tonight because it just cracks me up every time I think of it, is that Tony was once asked by a student to tell a class he was teaching a little bit more about Justice Windeyer. He misheard the question and gave the class a 10-minute burst on the Supreme Court of India. And then there are the typos and their modern reincarnation in the form of the electronic autocorrect function. I was puzzled years ago, I don't know if Tony remembers this, when a faculty meeting item at UNSW read, "Use of the word professor in the faculty." Had some people been exaggerating their status? No. In the early days of electronic typewriters, the item was intended to read, "Use of the word processor." More recently, in a book I edited just this year on legal education, one eminent author made a plea for teachers with more mastery of their subjects. I was lucky to detect a typo beyond the reach of spell check when I noticed that the proofs had her calling for teachers with more mascara. Perhaps that helps too, I don't know. And autocorrect once led our HR advisor at ANU to conclude his advice to us with the hope that he'd calcified the situation. Perhaps not as potentially calamitous as the example of a colleague of mine who meant to end an email communication with a student with the words, "Let me know if there's anything else you need," and fortunately discovered before it was too late that her draft said, "Let me know if there's anything else, you nerd." Well, as I've said, we all have our own experience of howlers and our own favourites. There's an abundant supply that Troy could draw upon many more editions of the Funny Dictionary. But I want to finish on a serious note, and that is to congratulate Troy not only for his erudite account of the history and nature of student howlers and his wonderful collection of them, but also for making a significant contribution to our mental health and well-being. However you view humour, whether as therapy or as something to be enjoyed for its own sake, these howlers will bring a smile to your face, perhaps even a tear to your eye. The authors are anonymous, so there are no victims, and we can't help but enjoy and be uplifted by the humour. I once met and got on very well with a visiting professor from Germany. The feeling must have been mutual because he subsequently wrote to me and clearly meant to say that he looked forward very much to meeting me once again. In the distinct way, however, the words are ordered in German, what he actually said was, "I look forward very much to meeting you again once." Although you never know, perhaps that was all he could offer. But in any event, Troy, and I finish with this point, I look forward very much to consulting your Funny Dictionary again, not once, but over and over and over, and I'm delighted to declare the book officially launched.